The Ant and the Grasshopper.
Under the blue sky, in a sunny and vast meadow, lived a hard-working ant and a grasshopper who loved to sing. When summer arrived, the meadow became lush with green grass and abundant grains, and the animals moved about energetically. The ant worked diligently from early morning. It picked up fallen wheat grains and carried heavy food on its back to its home. Even as beads of sweat dripped under the scorching sun, the ant never stopped. It knew that when winter arrived, snow would fall and food would become scarce. To have a warm and comfortable winter, it had to prepare in advance. The ant worked tirelessly every day collecting food, but the grasshopper only laughed at the ant. It couldn't understand why the ant was working so hard in such wonderful weather. The grasshopper played its violin, singing and dancing joyfully. Since summer was warm and food was plentiful, it believed that enjoying the moment was far more important than working. The ant looked at the grasshopper with concern. Right now, food was abundant, but when winter came, everything would freeze solid. At that time, it would be impossible to find food, so preparing in advance was essential. But the grasshopper didn't listen to the ant's worries. Since winter was still far away, it thought spending time having fun was the best choice. As time passed, autumn faded and cold winds began to blow. Then at last, winter arrived. The meadow was covered in white snow, and strong winds howled across the barren fields. The trees stood bare, and the once plentiful grains had completely disappeared. The ant stayed warm inside its home, enjoying the food it had stored during the summer. But what about the grasshopper? The grasshopper had nothing to eat. It wandered here and there, searching for food, but the snow-covered field offered nothing. It shivered from the cold and stomped its feet in desperation, but there was nothing it could do. Finally, the grasshopper knocked on the ant's door, its voice trembling as it pleaded for help. The ant opened the door and looked at the grasshopper. The poor creature was shivering, its body frozen stiff. The ant sighed and let the grasshopper inside. The grasshopper, who had spent the entire summer singing and playing, now regretted its choices as winter had come. It finally realized the importance of preparing in advance and promised to work hard like the ant when summer returned. The ant offered the grasshopper warm food and reminded it once again how crucial it was to prepare for winter. The grasshopper took a bite of the warm meal and nodded in understanding. Determined to change, it promised to build good habits and be ready for the future. Together, the ant and the grasshopper spent a warm and cozy winter. The moral of this story is that preparing for the future is very important. Even if things are easy and enjoyable now, challenges may come if we do not prepare ahead of time. By developing good habits and working hard, we can overcome difficulties no matter where or when they arise.
The Tortoise and the Hare.
Once upon a time, in a green forest, there lived a rabbit and a turtle. The rabbit was a very fast runner and had the best running skills of all the animals. So he often bragged about how fast he was in front of the other animals. The rabbit would laugh at the slower animals and always thought he was the fastest in the whole forest. On the other hand, the turtle walked very slowly. He took one careful step at a time and always moved forward quietly and steadily. The turtle knew he was slow, but he never bragged or compared himself to others. One day, the rabbit saw the turtle walking slowly and thought it looked funny. Then he thought to himself, "How quickly could I win a race against that turtle?" So the rabbit suggested a race to the turtle. The turtle quietly nodded, and they agreed to have a race. When the animals in the forest heard about it, they all came to watch. Everyone thought the rabbit would surely win and waited with excited eyes. The race would be held on a long path that went across the forest. The starting line and the finish line were marked, and the wise owl gave the signal to begin. As soon as the signal was given, the rabbit raced ahead. With just a few hops, he was already far ahead of the turtle. The turtle walked slowly but steadily. Even when he felt tired, he didn't stop or give up. He just kept going step by step. After a while, the rabbit looked back. The turtle was still far behind, moving at a very slow pace. The rabbit felt relaxed. "At this pace, I can take a short nap," he thought. So he lay down in the shade and closed his eyes for a little rest. But that nap turned out to be deeper than he expected, and the rabbit slept for a long time. Meanwhile, the turtle kept walking steadily. Even though he was slow, he didn't stop and kept moving forward. As time passed, the turtle quietly passed by the sleeping rabbit, and finally he reached the finish line. The rabbit woke up much later. He was shocked and rushed to the finish line, but the turtle had already won the race. The animals in the forest clapped and cheered for the turtle's victory. The turtle smiled shyly and bowed happily. The rabbit lowered his head and reflected on his carelessness and pride. From that day on, the rabbit no longer boasted in front of his friends. He remembered the importance of being steady and consistent like the turtle. This story teaches us that even if you are fast, being too proud can lead to failure. And even if you are slow, if you don't give up and keep going steadily, you can still reach your goal. Let's always remember that doing your best until the end is the most important thing.
The goose that laid the golden eggs.
Once upon a time, in a small village, there lived a hard-working and diligent farmer. Though he worked tirelessly every day, he had very little and always struggled to make ends meet. No matter how hard he toiled under the sun, his life never seemed to improve. One day, while tending to his farm, the farmer noticed something unusual in the nest of his goose. To his astonishment, there lay a shiny golden egg. He could hardly believe his eyes. Carefully, he picked up the golden egg and, with a heart full of curiosity, took it to the marketplace. There, he showed the golden egg to a goldsmith who examined it closely. The goldsmith's eyes widened in surprise. "This is pure gold, a real golden egg," he exclaimed. Overjoyed, the farmer sold the egg for a great sum of money. The next morning, the farmer hurried to check on his goose again. To his delight, another golden egg lay in the nest. Day after day, the goose continued to lay a single golden egg, and the farmer, once poor, became wealthier and wealthier. He bought fine clothes, ate delicious food, and even built a beautiful new house. The villagers admired his newfound prosperity. However, as time passed, greed took root in the farmer's heart. At first, he had been content with receiving one golden egg a day, but soon he grew impatient. "Why should I wait every day for just one egg? If I cut open the goose, I can take all the golden eggs at once and become even richer, much faster," he thought to himself. Finally, unable to control his greed any longer, the farmer decided to act. "I can't wait any longer. I must get all the golden eggs now," he declared. Without hesitation, he caught the goose and cut open its belly. but to his shock, the inside of the goose was empty. There were no golden eggs, only flesh and bones like any other ordinary goose. The goose had been special because it could lay one golden egg a day, but it did not store them inside its body. The farmer realized his terrible mistake. What have I done? If only I had been patient. I could have continued receiving golden eggs every day. But because of my greed, I have lost everything. However, it was too late. The goose was gone, and with it, his fortune. From that day on, the farmer had no more golden eggs to sell, and soon returned to his old life of hardship. This story teaches us that greed can lead to losing even what we already have. Instead of being impatient and wanting too much at once, we should learn to be patient and appreciate what we are given.
The Boy Who Cried Wolf.
Once upon a time, in a peaceful village surrounded by green hills and wide meadows, there lived a shepherd boy. Every morning, the boy would take his flock of sheep out to the grassy fields outside the village. While the sheep grazed peacefully on the fresh green grass, the boy often found himself with nothing to do. At first, watching over the sheep felt fun, but as the days went by, he began to feel bored and lonely. One day, the boy came up with a mischievous idea. What if I call the villagers and pretend a wolf is attacking? He thought. Climbing up a small hill, he shouted toward the village, "Wolf! A wolf is attacking the sheep. Help!" Hearing his cries, the villagers grabbed sticks, shovels, and whatever they could find, and rushed to the field to help. But when they arrived, there was no wolf to be seen, and the sheep were calmly eating grass. The boy laughed and said, "It was just a joke. I was bored." The villagers were angry, but they forgave him because he was just a child and went back to their homes. A few days later, the boy played the same trick again. He stood on the hill and shouted loudly, "Help! A wolf is here. It's attacking the sheep." Once again, the villagers came running, only to find there was no wolf. The boy laughed, thinking it was funny, but the villagers were upset. They whispered to each other, "We can't trust him anymore." Then, one day, a real wolf appeared from the nearby forest. The fierce wolf bared its sharp teeth and ran straight toward the sheep. Terrified, the boy jumped up and shouted with all his might, "Wolf! A real wolf! Please help!" But this time, no one came. The villagers thought he was playing another trick and ignored his cries. The wolf attacked the flock and many sheep were lost. The boy cried and ran to the village, but it was too late. The villagers were shocked when they realized he had told the truth this time. The boy felt deep regret for the lies he had told before. Because of his lies, no one believed him when it truly mattered. From that day on, the boy promised himself he would never tell a lie again. Though the villagers forgave him, it took a long time for them to trust him again. He learned that honesty is something very precious and hard to earn back once it's lost. Moral of the story: a single lie can destroy trust. Once people stop believing you, even the truth will sound like a lie. That's why it's important to always be honest and sincere.
The Crow and the Pitcher.
Once upon a time, on a hot summer day, the sun blazed down on the forest and fields. The green leaves hung limply under the burning rays, and even the small streams and ponds had dried up. Birdsong had faded away, and animals rested quietly in the shade, trying to escape the heat. High above, a crow was flying slowly across the sky. It was terribly thirsty. The poor crow had been flying for hours, searching everywhere for water, but every pond was dry, and the little puddles had disappeared under the scorching sun. The crow flapped its wings wearily and thought, maybe if I just keep going a little further, it'll find something to drink. After a long flight, the crow spotted something shiny near a small village. As it flew closer, it realized it was a clear glass pitcher. The crow landed next to it with hope in its heart. Looking inside, it saw that there was a little bit of clean water at the very bottom. It was just what it needed. But when the crow tried to drink, it discovered a big problem. The pitcher was tall and narrow, and the water was too deep inside. No matter how far it stretched its beak, it couldn't reach the water. The opening was too small, and the pitcher was too heavy to tip over. The crow walked around the pitcher, deep in thought. Should I give up? Is there anything I can do? Then it noticed something. There were small pebbles and stones scattered all around the ground. An idea suddenly sparked in its clever little mind. The crow picked up a small pebble with its beak and dropped it into the pitcher. It watched closely. Sure enough, the water rose just a little. Excited, the crow grabbed another pebble and dropped it in, then another and another. The crow worked tirelessly in the hot sun. It flew back and forth, picking up pebbles one by one and dropping them into the pitcher. It wasn't easy. The pebbles were heavy and the sun was hot. At times, the crow felt like giving up, but it didn't. It kept going, patiently and wisely. Finally, after many pebbles, the water rose high enough to reach the top. The crow dipped its beak in and took a long, cool drink. It was delicious and refreshing. The crow felt strong again, and it rested for a while beside the pitcher, proud of what it had done. Then, with energy restored, it flew back up into the sky, wings flapping confidently once more. When faced with a problem, don't give up or try to force your way through. Take a moment to think, use your wisdom, and find a creative solution. Just like the crow, even in tough situations, patience and clever thinking can help us reach our goals. A calm mind and steady effort are often the greatest strengths we have.
The Fox and the Sour Grapes.
Once upon a time, in a sunlit forest full of tall trees and soft breezes, there lived a clever fox. This fox was smart and quick, and he often got what he wanted without much trouble. Because of this, the fox sometimes became a bit proud and didn't like it when things didn't go his way. One hot summer day, the fox wandered through the forest looking for food. The sun was high in the sky, and the air was still and warm. The fox hadn't eaten anything since morning, and he was starting to feel very hungry and tired. He searched behind bushes and around trees, but there wasn't a single mouse or bird in sight. No matter how hard he tried, he just couldn't find something to eat. Just then, as he walked past a tall stone wall, he spotted something above it. Clusters of grapes hanging from a long vine. The grapes sparkled in the sunlight with their rich purple color, and they looked cool, juicy, and delicious. The fox's mouth began to water just by looking at them. If I could just have a taste of those grapes, he thought, I would feel refreshed and full. Those grapes must be the sweetest thing in this whole forest. So, the fox took a few steps back, then ran and leapt as high as he could to grab the grapes. But the grapes were much higher than they looked. His front paws missed them by quite a bit. He tried again, this time jumping with even more strength. But still, the grapes were out of reach. Again and again, the fox jumped, higher and harder each time. His legs started to ache and his breath came in short gasps, but he didn't give up right away. After several tries, the fox body grew tired and his legs felt heavy. He sat under the wall, panting, and looked up at the grapes with frustration. They still hung there untouched, as if teasing him. Then, the fox stood up, flicked his tail, and turned his head away. He said aloud, "Those grapes probably aren't even ripe. They must be sour and bitter. I don't really like grapes anyway. They're not worth my time." With that, the fox walked away, pretending not to care. But deep down, he was still disappointed. He had really wanted to taste those grapes. But since he couldn't reach them, he tried to convince himself that he didn't want them at all. Sometimes when we fail to get what we want, it's easy to make excuses or pretend it wasn't important. But instead of hiding behind excuses, it's better to accept our feelings honestly and try again another time. True strength comes from admitting when something is hard and choosing to keep growing anyway.
The Sun and the Wind.
High up in the sky, where they could always look down on the world below, the sun and the wind floated side by side. Though they had watched over the earth together for a long time, their personalities were quite different. The wind was fast and powerful, always moving with energy and force. The sun, on the other hand, was calm and warm, gently shining down on the world. One day, the sun and the wind began talking and ended up in a discussion about who was stronger. The wind boasted that it could shake the trees, stir the oceans, and blow away clouds. The sun nodded quietly at the wind's words, but believed that true strength didn't always need to be loud or forceful. The sun decided it would show its strength in its own way. So the sun and the wind agreed to a little contest. They would see who could make a traveler down on Earth take off his coat first. It was a fair challenge, and both were curious to see whose power would truly win. The wind went first. It took a deep breath and began to blow fiercely. Whoosh! Whoosh! It howled as it pushed against the traveler with all its might. The wind tried to blow the coat off, but things didn't go as planned. As the wind grew stronger and colder, the traveler felt chilly and pulled his coat tighter. He held on to his hat and kept walking against the wind. No matter how hard the wind blew, the traveler would not let go of his coat. In fact, the stronger the wind got, the more tightly the traveler held on to his coat, trying to keep warm and protect himself. The wind used all of its power, but still failed to make the traveler take off his coat. Now it was the sun's turn. The sun didn't start with a loud entrance. Instead, it gently began to shine its warm light down on the traveler. At first, it was just a little warmer, but slowly, the warmth grew softer and more comforting. Without saying a word, the sun let its warmth wrap around the traveler like a gentle hug. Under the soft sunlight, the traveler began to feel hot. A smile came to his face, and he slowly started to undo the buttons on his coat. After a little while, he took off the coat completely and carried it in his hand as he continued walking. The sun hadn't used force or noise, but its gentle warmth was enough to move the traveler to take off his coat. The contest ended with the sun as the winner. The wind quietly accepted the result and came to respect the gentle and warm strength of the sun. The lesson of this story is this: true strength doesn't always come from loudness or force. Actions speak louder than words, and warm kindness can create bigger changes than power alone. Instead of trying to force others like the wind, we should learn from the sun and approach with gentleness and patience. When we communicate with others, a warm heart often opens doors more easily than pressure ever could.
The Lion and the Mouse.
Once upon a time, in a vast, sunny grassland, there lived a mighty and majestic lion. The lion was known as the king of the plains, admired and respected by all the other animals, though many were also a little afraid of him. He spent his days leisurely, often taking peaceful naps under the shade of a large tree. One bright day, while the lion was deeply asleep under the tree, a tiny mouse happened to pass by. The little mouse, not noticing the lion, playfully hopped and skipped around and accidentally climbed right onto the lion's body. The mouse scurried across the lion's belly and paws, and eventually even reached the tip of his nose. At that moment, the lion suddenly woke up, startled. With a swift motion, he placed his huge paw over the little mouse, trapping it completely. As he looked closely, he found the tiny creature trembling with fear beneath his paw. The mouse, with all its might, politely begged for forgiveness. It explained that it never meant to disturb the great lion and had simply lost its way. The mouse promised sincerely that if the lion would spare its life, it would surely find a way to repay the kindness someday. At first, the lion was skeptical. How could such a tiny creature ever help someone as powerful as himself? However, seeing the mouse's earnestness, the lion's heart softened. He lifted his paw and gently let the mouse go. The mouse, deeply grateful, bowed low and quickly disappeared into the tall grass. One afternoon, as the lion was walking proudly across the plains, he fell into a trap set by human hunters. Thick ropes formed a strong net that tightened around him the more he struggled. Even with all his strength, the lion could not escape. He wanted to roar for help, but he knew that making noise might attract the hunters nearby. Tired and anxious, the lion lay still, trapped. Just then, he heard quick little footsteps approaching. It was the very same mouse he had spared some days ago. Without any hesitation, the mouse rushed over to help. Using its sharp teeth, the mouse began to gnaw through the thick ropes bit by bit. Though the mouse was small, it worked with determination and care. After a while, the ropes started to snap, and finally, the lion was free. The lion looked at the mouse with deep gratitude. He realized how wrong he had been to underestimate the little mouse. The mouse, with its tiny body but big heart, had saved the mighty king of the plains. From that day on, the lion and the mouse became true friends. They respected and cared for each other, cherishing their beautiful bond for many years to come. The lesson of this story is, no matter how small or weak someone may seem, we should never look down on them. Every being has its own value, and true help comes not from size or strength, but from a sincere heart. Let us always treat others with kindness and respect, for even the smallest friend can make the biggest difference.
Did you enjoy today's story? Now it's time to go to Dreamland. See you again next time.